bracket is out. The bracket is out. Heck, both brackets are out, but I'm going to talk about the women's bracket in this particular video. NCAA women's tournament. The bracket is out. You have the four number one seeds, top seed overall: UCLA, South Carolina, Texas, and USC. But we will talk about this on this edition of Rudy's Rant, her game, her way, women's podcast. Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of it. I thank you all for jumping on with me. It's been a long weekend as I had to deal with a lot of things involving my kids for travel basketball and football workouts. So I'm on the go all day on the weekend. My weekend never exists, especially now as they get older. But I thank you for jumping back on. For those of you who are new to the channel, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring the bell. For those of you who are back again, leave a comment, like the video. I greatly appreciate you. Let's talk about this bracket. So as I mentioned, the brackets have been released. The number one overall seed was UCLA. My guess is that South Carolina was the number two seed. Texas was probably the three, and USC was the four. The reason I say that is because UConn is a number two seed. I thought UConn should have been a one over Texas. That's my feeling. But I believe that UConn is probably the number five ranked team in terms of Duke, NC State, TCU, and UConn. So I can only presume that USC was the fourth number one seed. Let's look at these brackets real quick. You got UCLA, and I don't see anyone really getting in their way until a potential Final Four matchup with NC State. You got LSU as a three in this particular region. You have NC State as the two. Florida State is a six. I think when it comes down to the Florida State LSU matchup in the second round, it really depends on the health of LSU players. Are they healthy enough to play? If they're not healthy to go, I think FSU gets W over here. So the way I see it is you have a region that probably isn't all that great. But I will say this, I think a couple of these regions are pretty stacked and a couple of them are pretty thin. So looking at this UCLA region, I would be utterly surprised. Forget surprised. I'd be absolutely shocked if UCLA did not make it to the Final Four. I just don't see anyone getting in their way in this particular region. LSU is too small. They're just way too small. So even if they're healthy, they're too small. NC State, I think NC State versus LSU could be a great game if LSU is healthy enough to play. But that's my concern with LSU is health. You know, you're minus Flau'jae Johnson, you're minus Anisha Morrow. Can they go? Are they going to be 100%? Are they going to be close to 100%? I'm sure Flau'jae Johnson's going to go. Morrow kind of looked like she messed up her ankle pretty badly. But again, they're going to have 2 weeks off. Both of them, their first games are going to be the 21st or 22nd. And then the round of 32 is going to be a potential matchup between Florida State and LSU. I think that's going to be the biggest matchup potentially of all second round matchups to where I'm looking at them. I think that one's there's a few. That's a big one. I think a potential Tennessee Ohio State one will be a pretty decent one. TCU at Louisville has a storyline behind it. So we'll talk about that in a second as well. But I like UCLA out of this region. I just can't see any of these teams getting in their way. Moving over to the regional two, they don't even call it anything other than regional one, regional two, regional three, and regional four. Whatever happened to East, West, Midwest? I don't know what they've done. Looking over at the regional two, South Carolina is number one seed. Potential matchup with Utah, Indiana in the second round. Don't see that really phasing them. Maybe a matchup with Maryland in the Sweet 16. I look at the rest of the region. You got North Carolina and Duke. I just don't know why you would have two ACC teams. In fact, two of the better ACC teams. In fact, if you look at this whole thing, they got ACC teams potential match. They got multiple potential ACC matchups in the Sweet 16. Why would you bracket it that way? It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense to have these potential ACC matchups in the Sweet 16. You could have actually legitimately have a decent shot at having 3 in the Sweet 16. Not a fan of it. A rivalry game in the Sweet 16. You have a potential Duke Carolina game in the Sweet 16 with the winner playing South Carolina. I'll be real. Again, I don't see anyone beating South Carolina in this region. I know Duke's been playing well. Just can't see anyone beating South Carolina in this region. Because when you look at it, North Carolina is 27-7, Duke is 26-7. North Carolina did play UConn. They did play. They do have a loss against Notre Dame, a loss against Florida State, a loss against Duke, a loss against Virginia, another one versus NC State. I just, they have a win over Kentucky. They have a win over Duke earlier in the year, a win over Cal. They do have a win over NC State as well. And then when you look at Duke, they just came off winning the ACC championship. They played South Carolina and they lost 11. That game was at South Carolina. Let me confirm if it was actually at South Carolina or yeah, it was the SEC ACC challenge. And that game wasn't as close as the final score would indicate. They got blown out in that game. They got absolutely blown out of the building. So, yeah, I look at South Carolina as a head and shoulders favorite in this region. And then you go to Region 3. Region 3 is Texas as a 1 seed. I got to say, after watching Texas play South Carolina, I'm sitting here wondering how the hell Texas won as many games as they did. Defensively, they are very strong, but offensively, they are very limited. And I do think there is a possibility for an upset of Texas in a potential Sweet 16 matchup against Tennessee or Ohio State. I do have them getting to the Elite Eight. I might change that. I'm not sure. Texas really left me disenchanted after watching that game. In that region, you have TCU as the 2 seed. You have a Louisville 7 seed, Michigan as a 6, Notre Dame as a 3, Ohio State, Tennessee 4-5. I mean, this is a region that has some depth to it. This is a more wide open region. I think regions 3 and 4 are more wide open regions that can be had by a number of teams. Notre Dame has not been playing well. I don't know that they're going to get it back together again. They're going to have some matchup issues in a potential game with TCU. At the same time, TCU plays Louisville potentially in the second round. Remember, Haley Van Lith went to Louisville, so there's going to be some personal feelings there potentially. Notre Dame against Michigan in the second round. I can see a TCU Notre Dame game, and it's going to be, can Notre Dame wake up, or will they continue to play the way they've been playing the last few games of the season, last couple of weeks? Tennessee, Ohio State's one I'm back and forth on as well. And Tennessee, Texas is one I'm back on as well. I like women's basketball. There's a lot of board on women's basketball. It's hard to pick upsets because typically these teams are just better than the others. TCU, Texas is an Elite Eight game I have right now. It could change. I might flip out Texas. I'm pretty solid with TCU going to the Elite Eight, and I got TCU going to the Final Four as of right now and playing South Carolina in the Final Four. Now, you get to that final region, the USC region. Regional 4, USC is the 1, UConn is the 2. You have a potential USC, Kentucky, or Kansas State matchup in the Sweet 16. You have an interesting potential matchup with Oklahoma and Iowa in the second round. Iowa got a 6 seed. I think that's a high seed for them, actually, based on their body of work. I was expecting them to be more in that 7, 8, 9 range. I think it would have been really, really interesting to put them as an 8, 9 in this region, but you can't because they're conference opponents. I don't think you can. I mean, I wouldn't. I think while you're throwing all these ACC matchups, potential ACC matchups in the Sweet 16, I don't know why you don't have these potential Big Ten matchups very many Big Ten potential matchups in the tournament. I mean, there's some, but there's not real expectations. You know, looking at a Iowa Oklahoma game, you got UConn. I got UConn playing Oklahoma State in round two. UConn with a potential matchup with Iowa in the Sweet 16 potentially, or Oklahoma. I do have it as UConn Iowa. And then you have USC Kentucky. I have them meeting up in the Sweet 16. I do have UConn beating Iowa. This is a revenge game for UConn from last year's Final Four. And you're gonna have a UConn USC Elite Eight. And I think UConn's gonna beat USC again in the Elite Eight. I think that game that they played earlier this year is a great benefit to UConn. I think having seen and you scout them, you see the things that you can do to make it difficult for USC. UConn's been playing really well of late, and I think there's holes now that can be potentially exploited by a team like UConn. Gotta stop acting like UConn's not loaded with talent. They're not as big, I don't think, overall on the front line, but they are very, very talented. And look, end of the day, you have a big. This would probably be. This could do the biggest ratings of the tournament if you have a UConn USC Elite Eight game. It could do the biggest ratings of the tournament, even potentially bigger than the Final Four, if you think about it. It's a possibility because of the name to it. But I do have UConn coming out of that region. And so I have the Final Four, UCLA versus UConn, South Carolina versus TCU. And I got to tell you, I think we're going to see a rematch of that game earlier this year between UCLA and South Carolina. And I got UCLA winning the national championship. I do. We'll go a lot more in depth in this in the live on Tuesday at 9 p.m. And we'll chop it up, and I'll bring callers on Tuesday. I want to get people's opinions on this tournament, what you think the upset matchups are, and all that stuff. But I do have UCLA, UConn, South Carolina, and TCU. South Carolina, TCU is a rematch also, where South Carolina beat TCU like a drum. I don't think they'll beat them by 30 again, but I think they do beat them again. And I'm looking at a UCLA South Carolina matchup in the national championship, and I got UCLA winning the national championship. I've been on UCLA for quite some time, and they had me wavering because they couldn't beat USC earlier this year. But now I do have a feeling that you're going to have a UCLA national champion. Now the funny thing is like I said, I don't like the fact that they put UCLA and USC on the same side for the Final Four. I think it would have been better off having them meet up for a national championship if they were to play again. But if USC does beat UConn, USC and UCLA are going to go play for a fourth time, this time in the Final Four. That will obviously be humongous if that was to happen. All these games are going to be really exciting. This is going to be a great tournament. I'm excited about the tournament. And it's going to be a nice one. I think people should definitely be checking it out because it's open. I don't think it's as open as it was a couple of weeks ago. I think LSU is on the outside looking in now. I think Duke has a shot, but not much. I just don't think that I think South Carolina's region is otherwise weak. UCLA, if UCLA and South Carolina don't make the Final Four, I'd be absolutely shocked. Whereas in the region with USC, Iowa, UConn, Oklahoma, Kentucky, and then another region that has Texas, Tennessee, Ohio State, Notre Dame, TCU. I think those two regions are going to be very competitive, very, very competitive. But you let me know your thoughts in the comments. Love to hear what you have to say. And we will definitely talk about this more on live on Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Don't miss it. This is Rudy's Rant. Talk facts over feelings. Her game, her way, women's basketball. Let's go. Come on now.